Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePINed Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. We're excited to bring you interviews with the key founders in the DePIN landscape, investors, and ecosystem partners. This is an exciting time for DePIN, and this year we're going to be meeting even more founders, learning about the projects that they're building, about the traction they're getting, and about the revenue that they're generating. The podcast is brought to you by Fluence. Fluence is building a decentralized compute platform. It's a project I'm a co-founder of and really excited about. So buckle up for this year. Please subscribe to the channel, listen to us on Spotify or Apple. And of course, if you are around any of the large conferences, come to our DePIN Day, where you can meet these founders on the Fluence team in person and hear from all the ecosystem partners as well. So look forward to seeing you in person, and let's get going on this podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the DePINed Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Trowbridge. I'm thrilled to be here today with Patrick Dunlop, who is one of the two founders of Jackal Protocol, a decentralized storage protocol. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, Tom. Really, thanks for having me. It's been really great to finally get on this podcast. You've had some awesome guests.
Listen, really appreciate it. And listen, decentralized storage is one of the building blocks of DePIN, right? So one of the building blocks of our whole decentralized ecosystem. So love to hear about how you guys are tackling this super important problem, without which, we can't kind of build a decentralized world. So tell us what you're up to there and how long you've been at it.
Yeah, so we started back in 2021 in November, and the protocol's been live since October of 2022. So we've been building this decentralized storage network, and at the bare bones of it, it's really just a protocol for data resilience, cyber resilience, and at the end of the day, you could also think of it as a data sovereignty protocol where we specialize in self-custody, auto-healing, and a really ridiculously high security posture of data that's on our network.
Interesting. Well, tell us more about it, because, you've got, I think the easiest way to understand this is in relation to other decentralized storage, or even other storage is not decentralized, right? So help us understand the kind of availability of the data that you guys are trying to do versus kind of some others, which seem to be much more potentially less available.
Yeah, we all do things differently, right? At the base level, we all store data, and that's one piece of the puzzle, right? But it's essentially, what are you trying to use that data for is the question. So if you're looking for cold storage and archiving of data, and you want that to be cheap, the Filecoin marketplace is a great way to get that. If you're looking to store data for a long time as an archive, like forever, I think Arweave in their economic model, I think is 200 years of storage with one-time payments. That's a great solution for them too. What we want to specialize is hot storage, so data that is readily available and super active. And we want to focus on the cybersecurity and the actual permissions of who has access to what data, making sure that we have the permission system built in the chain, make sure we automate all the auto healing and the redundancy of the data, and make sure that you can build web scale applications on this network. So that's kind of like the difference. We all do storage. We all just do it a little bit differently for different use cases primarily. And another way to look at it from tech stack, if you're familiar with that, Jackal is the only proof of stake storage network. So if you're looking for like hot storage, high availability, really fast and snappy, that's kind of what we are built for. Everything else is kind of a proof of work blockchain.
That's really interesting. It sounds like that level of storage, that type of storage, is the storage that is very useful. And it probably is also a harder problem to solve, but maybe not. Like, I think of permanent storage as a very difficult problem to solve. And that comes, and I think Arweave's real innovation there was, I think, the crypto economic model, which allows for that persistent storage, which is really interesting. But I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but having less expensive and decentralized, easily available storage it also presents different challenges. So love to kind of hear how you think about that and how you approach that, and then kind of how you're positioned vis-a-vis kind of centralized competitors.
Yeah, so when you look at like the different use cases, obviously there's cold storage archiving of data, which is like really well served by Filecoin and Arweave. But if you want to build a web scale application on blockchain rails, specifically, or web scale application not even on blockchain rails, you need storage for both. You have two things that you need. You need high availability, so the data needs to be easily accessible and fast. And the second thing is you need really high scalability from the protocol level. So the question is that if you're proving a lot of files to the network, how can you make it so that you can actually have really high throughput without it actually bogging down the chain and making the block times go really large? Is really the big question. So the way that we do that is we do off-chain verification between storage providers and then put proofs on chain. And we do other things where we're thinking about moving into ZK for sharding so we can make the proofs smaller. But it's really a scalability from the blockchain level, and it's making it really available. So having actual nodes that aren't just that are specialized for the use case of the storage rather than being a validator and a storage provider in the same machine. We were able to segregate that into two separate machines for scalability, if that makes sense.
And so to answer this also sort of at somewhat of a higher level, state the obvious is that this type of storage is off-chain storage, like it is for Filecoin,
or
and
Arweave.
And is verified and validated and on chain, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you that's which is just people have to understand that first.
Yeah.
It's not actually stored on chain, because that leads to a whole bunch of expense and it's sort of impractical. But that's important because Fluence is off chain compute, which I have to always tell people because they automatically start thinking smart contracts, et cetera.
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like blockchains don't do storage very well. You can't put a lot of data into the blocks. I think it's about like the average is a few hundred kilobytes into each block. Sometimes you can get out to megabytes. Sometimes people are trying to move for gigabyte blocks. But the fact of the matter is that doesn't really scale very well. If you want to have a high throughput application, if you want to do social on chain, if you want to have the ability to build like a cybersecurity product, you can't really actually store the data on the chain. Number one, it'll be really expensive, and it's like trying to run a like Facebook on a calculator. It's just not something that you can do. But what the blockchain does really well is verification, and what it does really well is being a police of a network, so that you can have verifiability, and you can also have the ability to have who owns what data at what time, make sure that the storage providers are all acting in good faith, make sure that there's redundancy of the files, and if one of the storage provider drops off, then the validators would realize that, issue a new copy, and then copy from redundancy, like auto healing. So you can do things that are really fascinating where you can actually bake a lot of automation into the chain. And I think that's one thing that all these DePINs have in common, right? So, okay, why do you want to have a blockchain at the middle of this? Number one. And then number two is like, why do you want to have a token? Number one at the blockchain level is you can automate everything. You can automate cybersecurity posture with permissions, who has what data. You can automate like service level agreements of how much redundancy is going to be on the network for that file. And you can automate that all the providers act in good faith, and you can automate payments to the providers and taking payment for the storage as well. And then on the flip side, you can use the token to bootstrap CapEx. So for you to have something to sell, you have to spend a lot of money to actually have all of this storage capacity. That's the other thing that's beautiful about decentralized physical infrastructure networks is that if I wanted to compete with an AWS, for example, I don't think it's physically possible in this day and age to actually raise the capital to build out that hyperscaler data capacity, right? So that's kind of where my head's at right now.
Listen, yeah, I literally say this every time I give a talk on DePIN, so I would agree. But the one thing I would add to it is that in terms of enabling DePIN, just to make that point, is that you need to have the crypto kind of scale to basically fund the infrastructure build out from the crowdsource. So I get that for sure. But the other piece of this, and there's also the software layer, which has to be open and robust enough that you can create these networks far cheaper and easier than you could have 5 or 10 years ago. But the last piece is the availability and lower cost nature of hardware now. And hardware costs have come down substantially, which also aids in this. And whether that aids in storage, for sure, it also aids in a whole bunch of other DePIN projects. Is all more consumer-based, where you can buy now cameras and sensors that are a fraction of the price they used to be years ago. But on your network, help me understand both who the storage providers are, and then also what the economics are and the value proposition to customers when you're onboarding customers. Is it the decentralization? Is it redundancy? Is it price? What's the value prop? And then who are the actual providers that are storing the data for you?
Yeah, so we can start with where the data is actually being stored. So essentially, we have data centers all around the world with idle storage capacity, where compute's in high demand, but storage isn't in high demand. So we can actually bootstrap a large amount of storage capacity quite easily and offer that at a competitive rate. But the price is one thing, and then that kind of gets into who uses it, right? So Jackal has 3 ideal customer profiles. Number one is the privacy advocate, the individual that's into crypto for the sovereignty and making sure that I have access to my data and I'm the only one that can see my data. So that's one thing that Jackal really specializes in is digital privacy posture and cybersecurity posture and just cyber resilience of the actual storage itself. That comes with our background. We're all digital forensics guys, right? So who is using it? We have the privacy advocate that uses it, where they kind of use it like a decentralized Dropbox, where they have like the highest cybersecurity and privacy posture possible. Number 2 is the Web3 developer. If you're on chain, there's no way for you to call a contract and get access to scalable storage. That's just fundamentally not something that's baked in, and it's not something that can be automated at the blockchain level right now. You have to use API spaghetti in the back end, and that's not really great for a lot of different use cases, which limits our ability to build web-scale applications that aren't financed on blockchain rails directly. So that's number 2. The way that we do that is you can build directly on Jackal. We wrapped all our protocol modules into a smart contract and we forward deploy them on other chains. And then we use message passing technology between our blockchain and other blockchains for them to get access to scalable storage. And then, so it's the Web3 developer that just wants to build bigger. And then the third ideal customer profile is enterprises essentially looking for cyber resilience. So they want a place that they can put data and know that no one can access it other than them. That's number 1. They want to know that the files will auto heal. That is a SLA that's baked into the protocol and automated. And then number 3 is they want to make sure that in case of emergency, they can always recover from a cyber event. So whether that's ransomware, whether that's human error, whether that's a natural disaster, their data is always readily available for them to reload and have business continuity. So those are the 3 main customers of Jackal. Enterprise goes to Rust. Their value proposition, they don't care about decentralization, self-custody, ownership. They really more care about actual business continuity. The Web3 developer likes that they can actually use it on chain and integrate it on chain directly with their smart contracts. And then the individuals, they just want a high security posture and privacy posture. So put simply, that is the 3 ideal customer profiles that we have right now.
And the value prop for each one. And the fascinating part you just mentioned that I stuck on, because I think it's how DePIN scales, is you mentioned SLA, service level agreement, and that's effectively the guarantee that either the network or your providers give to your customers. And that's something that we know at Fluence is going to be the gating item to getting, institutional corporate, adoption. And there are very few, I think, DePIN projects that have set up or executed SLAs. And so if you've done that, it sounds like, right, and that's an enormous, benefit to your project, right? To be able to offer SLAs to customers has to put you in a very unique category, I would say.
That's one thing that's the beauty of blockchain technology is the SLAs are governed by immutable code, not by our feelings or my signature on a piece of paper, right? The Jackal Protocol would guarantee that there are 3 copies of your data that is always available on the network. And then no one can access that data other than the end user with the private key to decrypt that file. So those are 3 SLAs that we can't even access your data even if we wanted to, and we can't keep your data off the network even if we wanted to. So those are very, very strong SLAs governed and automated at the protocol level, secured by our validator set in our blockchain. So there's no one, like I can't even break that SLA even if I wanted to.
But the SLA is then about the accessibility of the data. It's not about the storage availability about the data. Is that fair? So is the SLA relate to persistence, i.e. you will have your data, 99.99% of the time? Is there availability related to that, or is it just privacy?
No, this is there's 2 pieces. So on the availability side, for it to be available, it has to be stored. So how this system works on Jackal is you upload a file, you send a message to our validators. Our validators say, okay, this person wants to store this file for this X amount of time. That file then it gets guaranteed by the protocol. The tokens go into the protocol into a smart contract that drip feeds out to the providers. That file goes over HTTPS to one storage provider. And then the protocol issues 2 more storage deals, and then it gets copied from redundancy. It's encrypted locally before it even touches the network in the first place by your private key. essentially, in the event that, let's say that we have 3 storage providers and one of the providers says, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to unplug my machine. What will happen is that that provider will not be proving that file to the validator set. It's like a 1 kilobyte encrypted chunk where they send over to the validator set to say, okay, do they have the file? Yes or no. If they fail that, then the validators will assume that that provider does not have that file anymore, issue a new storage deal, and copy again from redundancy. So it's like storage whack-a-mole on the data storage and availability front. So the data has to be stored, number one, but it has to be available for the providers to actually prove that file, a chunk of that file, to the validator set. And that chunk is randomly generated every X amount of blocks. So they don't know which chunk. So they can't just like hold one chunk and then put other chunk in like archive storage, right? And then on the privacy side, we have an encrypted file tree built into our blockchain directly, which is pretty cool. So when a file is on the network, it's in a user's file tree that's encrypted on-chain. And when they go to call back that file, the only way that they can decrypt it is with their private key locally on their machine. If you want to share a file, say I want to send a file from me to Tom, I can take Tom's public key, my private key, mint a new key to decrypt that file, and I can revoke that from Tom at any moment. So you have not only a ridiculously high security posture, but you also have these availability and storage guarantees. It's governed by immutable code running in our validator set.
And so that SLA, then back to my question, also addresses availability.
Yes, because the file has to be available for them to prove the validator set. And if they can prove it to the validator set, they can send it to the end user as well. We can, if we want to make this faster, we can do other stuff where we can run a shims in the middle. You can run a CDN on top of this between the providers and the end user. But from general availability, the protocol guarantees that all the files are available at any given moment on our protocol.
That's great. A lot more questions, but I want to back up for a second and talk about Patrick. Let's learn about your background and how you came to found Jackal.
Yeah. So my background, I worked in digital forensics and investigations for law firms in Canada. So that was what I was doing, and my co-founder, we were working at this company together, actually. How we got into crypto is back in 2021, there was a lot of flash loan attacks that were happening. And the only way to get recovery of those digital assets was to sue people civilly, because the police just didn't really understand how this technology works. So they would just drop the cases. So that's kind of how we got into blockchain in the first place. We were kind of like the really, really early pioneers of digital asset recovery. That's how we learned deeply about how this technology works. And then we had this problem internally where we couldn't have like a clean forensic environment in the cloud. And a clean forensic environment means that you have data that is, number one, not accessed by anyone else, but number two, has no way for anyone else to alter that data, and it's clean. So we were just like stacking up hard drives on our desk because we couldn't use a cloud provider, because in theory, a third party can have access to that data, or a third party can delete that data, which is kind of a fundamental flaw. So all the SaaS tools are not cloud-based. All the forensics tools are not SaaS applications. So we were thinking about, okay, blockchains are a really special way of who has access to what stuff at what time. It's like a magical spreadsheet that's never wrong, and it can guarantee SLAs at the protocol level. So we thought, is it possible to make a clean forensic environment in the cloud? So we built this on Polygon. We built it on Polygon. We were backing up to Filecoin. And then we realized there was an issue with Filecoin where we have to manage all of our deals ourselves. So we had to manage our own redundancy. We had to manage our own encryption keys locally and do all that stuff by ourselves. And the other issue is it's taking us 24 hours to get our files back from Filecoin from cold storage. So that wasn't great. So then we were like, okay, what if we use the secret network for encryption, and then we'll use Filecoin, and then we'll build a peer-to-peer network in the middle as a hot storage caching layer between Filecoin and us. And then that didn't scale either. So we ended up building our own Cosmos L1 blockchain to solve our problem. And in that, we realized that this technology solves a lot of problems for a lot of different people as well.
Really interesting. I mean, I think in the DePIN space, almost everyone, not everyone, but a lot of the founders come from solving a particular problem and then discovering that crypto and blockchain are a good tool to help in that solution. as opposed to a lot of other parts of crypto where you see sort of developers come up with an idea and then try to figure out a problem the idea is solving. And so it's I think that you're yet another example of someone that's come from a very particular background, particular problem set solving, and figuring out the best way to deploy blockchain to effectively answer that problem.
And that's a good point. We're not in blockchain because we inherently love blockchain from the beginning. We are in blockchain because we actually need a solution to our problem. Don't get me wrong. Like I like gambling on meme coins every now and then, but at the same time, I just want to have a lasting impact by building a protocol that is extremely cyber resilient. And the applications of this technology is pretty profound. If you think about global cybersecurity posture, actually fixing a lot of the cybersecurity issues at a protocol level rather than a third-party tool level, it becomes pretty interesting.
Yeah, listen, I get it, and it sounds, you mentioned meme coins for a second there, and and also the importance of having this resilient storage that's not subject to centralized risk control, et cetera, or 80-page term of service agreement. So there's a lot there to get into on the meme coin concept, though. That drives me to think about token economics. So help us understand kind of how your providers work, how the economics of the network kind of flow through from your storage providers to the storage kind of users and customers.
Yeah. So we made mistakes along the way, actually, in token economics, because that's like our weakest point when we started the protocol, to be completely honest. So in the early days, we looked at the Filecoin model and the Arweave model, and then we went, okay, like we should just use inflation-based economics to actually bootstrap the network. But a fundamental flaw that we see in the space, and something that we fell victim to as well, is that you actually have this huge demand to supply discrepancy. So it's this issue where, like, okay, you can bootstrap the network because it's a gold rush and DePIN where you can spin up all these machines, but do you actually need all those machines, and what's the demand side of the actual product that you're building? So that was kind of like this whole issue that we found, where we were printing more tokens than there was demand for the actual product, because all these solutions were governed by, we're valued by cash flow. We're not particularly valued by speculation, because we have cash flow and you can see it on chain. So we adapted earlier this year to a real yield model, where we wanted to build a model where there's always going to be a little bit extra capacity than there is demand, but we don't want that spread to get way, way too wide. So basically how it works is we have a storage stipend, which is a little bit of inflation to make sure it's kind of like a universal basic income for the storage providers, so we don't have a mass unplugging event. And then on the flip side, everything else that they make is real yield. So if someone comes and they purchase storage for X duration, it's set at the protocol level that is $15 a month per terabyte. It's not a marketplace. That price can change based on governance, but at the end of the day, for those $15 a month, if you have 1/3 of that file, you're going to get 1/3 of that $15. Does that make sense? So we have like a pretty extensive economic model, and we went with real yield because we just didn't want a lot of capacity that wasn't used.
And so how then does that, if the price is 15 per terabyte, just to make the math easy, and I am storing, I'm one of the 3 instances serving it, right? I get $5 per month, right?
That's just for simple math, but there's, for that $15, a percentage of it goes to the validator set, a percentage it goes to just like development, and the remainder goes to the storage providers, and they'll get 1/3 of that pool.
So, right. So ballpark, if it's, pick whatever numbers make sense, but how much ends up going to storage providers?
So it would be 1/3 of whatever the storage providers make. So I believe it's 40% of the actual $15. So if $15 goes to storage providers, and then that gets split amongst who actually stores that individual's files. So it doesn't go to everyone. It goes to who's actually serving that individual. And that's in a smart contract. So let's say that it's being stored for a year. You will get 1/3 of that 30% of $15 goes to each storage provider, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally get it. And so, I get it. So if, but then where's the value accrued to the token in all of this?
Because it's a medium of exchange for data storage. So as someone needs storage, they purchase tokens, whether indirectly or directly, to purchase storage from the protocol. So buy pressure comes from demand for storage. And if there's a lot of storage, that is being demanded, then you're actually paying less tokens for storage, if that makes sense, because the price fluctuates.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. That I get the idea. I'll tell you that we've come up without you kind of did, so you lived it. We kind of saw this from we launched Fluence last year, but we saw and had talked to a bunch of Filecoin miners and kind of saw some of the challenges that happened, and so we specifically could have onboarded tons of compute capacity, but didn't do it. And so onboard just a little bit to prove it works. And then we're onboarding customers. And so just like you are going to keep this kind of margin above what we need over time, which we are rewarding just in our token. Sounds like you are as well. And then when they're on the network, they get paid directly from in the deals from the providers, from the customers. So the same concept. We may introduce a small fee on top of that, but that is, I think that is the way to do it. So it also sounds like is that for most DePINs is the case. There's a huge amount of supply. That's the easy bit, and securing and bringing the demand on is the larger, harder challenge. It sounds like that's something you guys have experienced as well.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing is you're building the protocol level, but the protocol level doesn't solve a specific problem for a specific individual. You need to build applications specifically to solve problems, right? So the protocol does a lot of things really well. It does privacy well. It does auto-healing redundancy well. It does the ability for you to have availability of those files really well. But unless you can use that in an intuitive way, so for an enterprise that wants to use Jackal and their needs are cyber resilience and business continuity, and an individual that wants to use Jackal for storing their personal files privately and securely in a self-custodial manner, those experiences are widely different. And the integrations that need to integrate with the software that those people are using is also widely different. So it really is up to us to build on the application layer, or third parties to build on the application layer to draw demand for storage. So we have a few products. We have Jackal Quick Connect, which is cyber resilient S3 buckets. So if someone wants to use S3 buckets, they can use that on Jackal. If we have Jackal Vault, which is like a personal drive product, we have Jackal PIN, which is public files for file hosting and high availability of that. And then we're looking to build an enterprise product right now for cyber resilience of backup and recovery and cyber events.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it sounds like I would agree entirely with that, which is, and again, it's a big difference from the rest of crypto where people sort of built it and expected with, the right yield offering, customers will just come, or DeFi TVL will grow, or whatever it is. And so that's not the case in DePIN, where you both need to have BD out there, which sounds like you're doing, and have to build that application layer to bring customers in. Because if you don't have it, centralized competitors have it. So like no one's going to go just do it.
We have a full sales team for enterprise deals. But that's the thing. It's when you don't go with the marketplace model and you go with a SaaS model at the protocol level, it's a completely different sale, right? And it's because if I'm selling, in your instance for you guys are doing compute, correct? And if you're doing compute, there's so much demand for compute. Having a marketplace for compute makes sense, right? Because you can't get compute very easily. Like I do dangerous things to get my hands on a few H200s, right? But on the flip side,
those are GPUs. Those are GPUs.
Oh, you're on
CPUs.
CPUs. Okay,
yes.
You're going CPUs.
Yes,
but,
different thing.
But that is kind of where we're at, where we do storage extremely well for a very extremely specific use case. And for us to sell that, we have to have a sales operation.
Yeah, listen, well, we do too. And compute sounds more commoditized. It is not. So, we're working to get an SLA so we can have exactly the same type of customer base you're targeting. We've launched VMs. Those are in beta stage right now. It's coming again with very specific use case to just third-party node providers right now. That's it. And then we add more customers. So it's the same level of complexity that you're experiencing. But it's just interesting because it's different. You're building much more higher up the stack than like a Filecoin, for example, which is really focused on the protocol from what I understand.
It's one is you can look at this in public markets as well, right? If you just do market research on storage and just storage as a whole, if you're looking at just offering cheap storage, you can look at it like a Backblaze as a comparable, where like they do storage super cheap and it's super awesome. Their ability to drive margins and drive growth becomes very difficult. So our whole thing was just like, okay, can we do something better than anyone else in the market? And I think that comes with digital privacy, cybersecurity posture, and sovereignty of the data. And with that, we can actually charge a premium, if I'm being completely honest. So the protocol is going to take $15 a month. If someone builds something that solves a specific problem, you can charge much more than $15 a month, because the problem you're solving isn't the cost of storage. The problem you're solving is business continuity and cybersecurity, right? So if you look at like the Backblaze and Rubrik, for example, both do storage at the base layer. One is providing a product for cyber resilience to protect companies, and one is providing really cheap S3 buckets. Those are very, very different value propositions and different service offering. And one is selling few terabytes of storage for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. One's selling a few terabytes for like $7 a month. And it's very interesting from that perspective. So that's how we approach it when it comes to storage specifically.
Well, so, and that I think, what you're saying is also, that I find less typical in the DePIN space, where sometimes the service or product being offered is superior to a centralized competitor. Yours is actually, but yours is dramatic. It sounds like it's specifically architected to be differentiated and superior, so you can charge a premium for it. And most DePINs are charging, similar price or significantly discounted versus centralized competitors. But your product is so specialized and so distinct that you can charge a premium for it. That's fascinating, and that is, I don't see that very often here.
Well, that comes with setting the price at the protocol level, right? Because if you create a marketplace, then the market's going to set the price. And if the value is being a marketplace, then that is awesome. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're setting the price based on the value provided by the protocol, and you align incentives between the people that are using the protocol, the people that are providing infrastructure to the protocol, and the teams that are building the protocol, to align all those incentives to actually set the price at the base level. And then the people that build applications on top, they can charge much more, because they know that their fixed cost for a terabyte is going to be $15 a month per terabyte with 3 times redundancy. And whatever value you can build on top of that determines the price that you can actually sell that to the market.
Yeah, fair enough. But the core is that $15 is you're providing a service that people think that is a very good value for, and that's what you're obviously doing, which is great. That is, that's not every project can say that.
It's a different approach. And it's what problems are we looking to solve, and for who, and what is the market price of those products? Can you still beat them on price while still charging a premium, is the question at the protocol level.
And speaking of charging, you mentioned revenue. Help us understand kind of where you are revenue wise, how big you think this can be. Like, how do you think about scale in terms of what you're doing? Obviously, I got to guess the market is vast, but how do you think about where you are now and where you want to be in a 1, 5, whatever year time frame makes sense?
Yeah. So to be completely honest, we started building in 2021, and we've had scalability issues. We've only been able to get the protocol actually in a stable state to build on top of very recently, at the beginning of this year, with our V4 upgrade. So now that the protocol is stable and everyone's happy and the thing works, right now we're able to go up market and actually start to build the applications. So right now, just from the pure protocol of pretty much using a CLI or very basic graphic interface to use the protocol like a Dropbox, we have about 1,036 users that are currently using it from that level. Are those users created equally? No. Some are buying hundreds of terabytes and some are buying a few gigs. So it's really different. But what our focus right now is, from Jackal Labs' perspective, is we want to build 2 applications. One that solves the problem for the individual, and then one that solves the problem for the enterprise. And a lot of our sales effort is actually talking to enterprises to essentially get them to sign early access beta contracts, so that we can co-build something with them to solve their specific use cases and then get them onto the network that way. So that's what our goal is we just need a mass migration event to get as much data onto the protocol as humanly possible.
And help us understand what that means. Where's your target? 1,000 customers. Hard to understand what that means revenue wise or data wise. What do you track revenue? Do you track data stored? And where do you want to see those numbers go? What's targets for you guys?
So right now in the last 3 months, when we're looking at like the stats that we have, you can go to stats.jackalprotocol.com. It's all completely open source and you can take a look. So we have like total users that have used the protocol is 1,000. Storage purchase is 165 terabytes and space available is 234 terabytes. Active files has grown about, obviously, since it only just recently started working, it's kind of hard to see like compounded growth on this, but we have about 138,000 files that are on the network and secured. And protocol owned liquidity, which is like a percentage of those storage fees, is about like 5,000, pushing $6,000 right now. So we're at like the very, very, very early stages of actually commercializing this product.
But scale wise, I mean, do you expect those numbers to be how much? Where do you want to go? Just you know the size of your team, you know the size of the market. What's achievable?
What's achievable? I think that we can hit unicorn status with a protocol like this if we can build a product on top of it that can provide value. So that was our goal. So at the enterprise level, like we're really looking to target a comparable would be like a Cohesity or a Rubrik in publicly traded markets. So that's what we're going for. Rubrik is they went public very recently. They're trading at like, I think it's $10 billion right now. So that is our target. And we're looking to get deals for those applications on top of the protocol that are looking for like 6-figure deals specifically.
You know, one thing I was thinking about with regard to your protocol is because of your resilience and that the 3 copies, you actually, the actual compute providers themselves, or sorry, storage providers are almost, they're just less relevant, right? Because they're almost commoditized, because one goes down, it resets and stores with somebody else. So you're effectively commoditizing the storage layer, right? So you're commoditizing that. So who those providers are is a lot less important. Is that how you think about it? But you also mentioned data centers. Would it also work in retail machines or not?
We don't really aim for retail machines. Like someone can spin up a retail machine, but the question becomes is that can that retail machine sustain the SLAs that the validators expect out of that actual machine, right? So if you don't have gigabit internet, you're not going to make the proofs. So that's just like out of the gate. So we don't really aim for consumers we don't aim to sell like consumer drives and have them spin that up. Just because you need to be pretty technical to run this thing. That's the first and foremost. And number two, if the infrastructure of the network's not good, then the products that are built on it is also not good, because yeah. So that's kind of where our focus is on that end. So pretty much either you have a data center that has idle capacity that's plugging in, or on the flip side, you're like a system administrator, day job, and at night in your basement, you've like retrofitted your basement into a data center effectively. So those are kind of like the 2 people that we focus to actually onboard as a provider.
And how many providers do you guys have?
That's a good question. We have it's actually not on the stats page. I think it's around 200 right now.
200.
Yeah, 200.
Okay, and those are all data centers?
Primarily. So it's either people that are renting data centers or the data centers themselves, like renting hardware from the data center. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to tell you, the other, Fluence, we sort of the same thing. We're far a little behind you, but we only are working with data centers in kind of pretty much tier 4s, because it just makes our technology easier to do if it's more resilient, more reliable. And it's also easier for us to explain to customers as well. We don't yet have the SLAs, but it's going to be we won't be able to do the SLAs if we weren't just working with those data centers.
And that's the thing, right? And if you just set the rules at the protocol level, then it makes it a lot easier that will tell you who is going to be the provider of the network, because if you spin a machine that doesn't work, you're not going to earn, right? So that's kind of where our head's at on that end. And it's exciting that it scales, right, with demand. If the capacity gets really high on those machines that are providing storage, then they're all printing. In the event that there is a lot less storage demanded than is supplied, then they're not making much money at all. So it's a very, very tight spread between the demand and the actual storage provided, if that makes sense. So there's only like double the amount of storage available than is actually demanded right now.
Well, listen, talk to us about, you've been doing this for a while. We mentioned, a couple of projects. Are there other projects in the DePIN space you pay attention to, you think are interesting in solving problems, or have teams you pay attention to?
Teams that I pay attention to, I'm pretty close with Greg from a Cache. I think they're doing some cool stuff. I think you guys are awesome. I think that what's another
Right answer?
Yeah, I know, I know. Who else do I think is cool? I think a GeoNet's interesting. I like some of the hard like consumer hardware mapping technology as well. If you look at a Hive mapper or the guys that are plugging into vehicles like a Demo, for example.
Demo.
I think those guys are all building really interesting stuff in the space. What I'm also fascinated by is the spread of demand, right? And that's really fascinating where you're looking at like a GeoNet and the demand for that data is actually pretty interesting since we kind of work in storage space. It's a little bit different. But if I was going to build another DePIN, I don't plan on it anytime in the near future. I'd probably try to figure out what data is the hardest to get and just work back from there. Because I think that the success of incentivizing people to collect very difficult to find data, and if it's very difficult to find and it's effectively real time, I think that's pretty special. You can think about it as like, how can I get data that a hedge fund would buy, for example? I think that's an interesting mental model. It's just like, okay, can I figure out how much stuff is being shipped? Can I build a camera network that figures out foot traffic that's going into different retail places? Like that's where my head's at for new DePINs coming out.
Listen, I mean, I think on that point, I remember hedge funds buying, satellite images of parking lots to figure out traffic patterns at big box retailers, as an example. So I've seen that has existed, but there's probably better ways to do it. I'll tell you interesting. When I talked to XYO just the other day, they basically have 500,000 people on their phones or providers, and they can have tasks like find me every restaurant in the zip code, boom, and then the community is then just tasked with very specific, hyper local tasks, which I think is interesting that the big giants like Google aren't set up to do.
I think another cool one is, and this comes kind of down to privacy regulation that's coming down from the government level, where they're starting to regulate like GDPR compliance and all these different compliance things, whereas making it more and more difficult to collect personal information, which I think is net good. But on the flip side, I'm curious if you could build a network where individuals can actually sell their data. Let's say it's only like $20 a month. Right. And you can actually put geolocation on, you can do the cross app tracking, you can do all those things and have a way that they can consent to that. Say like, I'm doing all this data, like they can see my location, but I don't want them to see my bank. Right. And actually choose what you'd be interested in selling. I think that is an interesting use case as well. I don't know if that's particularly infrastructure. It's kind of like more like an application, but that's fascinating to me as well. It's like, how can you build something that has sovereignty and consent built in, but also solve a problem for larger enterprises where they're not able to access that data, which is key for them to drive growth.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of ways to do that. Even if the value is in $20 a month, it's probably a lot less than that, frankly, per person. But the ways you do that, you run contests, like you run lotteries and contests. So there's big prizes every month or whatever it is. So there's always this. It gets you in the system of winning something. Anyway, there are things like that for sure. That would be interesting.
Instead of it just being like, oh, $20 a month guaranteed, imagine it was something just like, okay, like I'm a company, you can download it on this phone and companies might ask you specifically for your data. So let's say that I want to move into a developing nation, right? For example, like I want to build parking lots and just like have something where it's quizzes, like what you were talking about, is like, how many of you guys own cars? Something as simple as that, right? It might be interesting and just like have it hyper targeted instead of just like a blanket. And then that would actually jam up the actual cost for that data possibly.
Yeah, that will happen. And one of the things we sort of touched on earlier is that the availability and functionality of smartphones helps make that much easier. And whether that's questionnaire or simple, but all those sensors will give the availability of lots of other forms of data that might be valuable as well to a large number of people.
There's a company called, it's from Founders Fund. They're called Flock Security, I believe. And what they're doing is like, they're just like wiring up cities with cameras and then selling subscriptions to police, which is interesting as well, right? I don't know, like I'm kind of more of a privacy guy, but that's also an interesting angle. Where like imagine you can wire up all the security cameras and then have like a portal where you strip away all the metadata, maybe. I don't know.
A little dystopian there. That
Little
has
bit,
some
little
there's
bit.
some elements of different movies are coming to mind. Interesting. Well, listen, how do people, by the way, the last comment I want to make is what I also think interesting about what Jackal's doing is you guys are one of the few DePIN projects that actually has retail customers. A lot of DePIN has retail providers, but almost all are using that data for business. And so business are the customers. You obviously have business and retail. And that is, I think, pretty unique in having that offering available to both. That leads to a bunch of other challenges, but I think that's great because that means it should you'd be much better known theoretically, right? As a retail focused brand.
Yeah,
storage.
It's the whole thing. It's just really people use it as just a safe place to keep private information. Just because inherently, since the wallet technology kind of cuts us off at like the usability of the protocol, you have to sign a transaction every single time you upload a file. For us to automate that, you have to inherently centralize it. So like there's this kind of thing where a lot of our retail guys they're just looking for like a really secure place to have files in case anything happens to their data. And it's an awesome use case. It's just a completely different sales channel and funnel.
Pretty cool. Well, listen, how do people, if anyone needs to store their data safely and securely, they got to find you? How do they find you? How do they upload? How do they become a customer?
Yeah. So if you're an individual, hit us up on Twitter, follow us, join Discord, Telegram. That's the best place to talk to us directly. Or you can just go to jackalprotocol.com and just open up Jackal Vault and start using it like a Dropbox. If you're a business, whether you're a small business, medium-sized enterprise, or a large enterprise, specifically working in IT, CISOs, or CEOs of those businesses, at the end of the day, we'll talk to anyone, to be completely honest. But if this is something that's interesting for you for business continuity or cyber resilience and making sure that no matter what happens under a cyber attack, you guys are safe and can reload, just please reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly through Twitter or just go through the proper channels at jackalprotocol.com.
And what I'll just add to that is that we've launched something called the DePINed Pledge, where we're getting companies to basically commit to using some element of their infrastructure on DePIN. And it sounds like all of your customers are already in compliance with that pledge. And so I think that's something we just want to call attention to people using DePIN. And so we should collaborate on this pledge because it sounds like you got a lot of participants on it already.
That would be really interesting. We have a bunch of calls next week that might be interesting to also have a funnel that way. We should talk about that afterwards.
Very cool. Awesome. Great to meet you, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
The
Tom.
DePINed Podcast, the place where we explore real-world use cases unlocked by crypto. That's all for today. Thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us grow. Add a like, add a comment. And of course, if you have anyone you think we should be talking to or have on this podcast, either leave a comment there or reach out. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.